The child was born during the quiet shift, when the hospital lights were low and most of the staff moved slowly, half awake. The colony world of Lathen 9 was not important. It was small, human-run, and far from major trade lanes. Nothing historic ever happened there. That was why the parents chose it. The mother screamed once, then went silent as the baby slipped into the doctor's hands. The sound that followed was small and thin, but alive. A normal cry. A healthy cry. The nurse smiled with relief. The doctor nodded. Another human child, another number added to the colony registry. Then the baby opened its eyes. The room did not change at first. Machines continued to beep. The air recycler hummed. Outside the window, the orange star of Lathen burned calmly. The nurse froze. The doctor leaned closer, frowning. That's strange. The baby's eyes were not human. They were not glowing. They were not burning. There was no light show, no sudden power failure. They were worse than that. They were calm. The pupils were vertical slits. Dark, sharp, and perfectly centered. The irises were deep bronze, lead like overlapping scales, catching the light in a way no human eye ever should. Dragon eyes. The nurse stepped back as if struck. That's not possible, she whispered. The doctor's hands tightened around the child, not in fear, but instinct. He ran the scanner again, slower this time. Human DNA. No splice markers. No artificial sequences. No alien contamination. Pure human. The baby yawned and closed its eyes, already drifting back to sleep. For a moment, no one spoke. Then every sensor in the room spiked at once. Across the hospital, alarms chirped and then fell silent. The lights flickered. The local network lagged, as if choking on too much data. Somewhere far above the planet, an automated relay woke from standby and sent a signal it had never sent before. Priority, absolute. Classification, pre-extinction marker. Recipient, Galactic Council oversight. The parents did not notice. They were crying softly, exhausted and happy. The father reached out. Can I hold him? The doctor hesitated. He had sworn an oath. But something old and cold settled in his stomach, something that did not feel like fear, but like memory that did not belong to him. Yes, he said finally. The moment the father touched the child, the signal completed its jump. Light years away, in chambers older than human spaceflight, council members stopped mid-sentence. Ancient observers, some of whom had not moved in decades, turned their heads toward the same data stream. One word appeared on their shared display. Dragon. The chamber fell silent. On Lathen 9, the hospital doors slid open without request. A black uniformed courier stepped inside, carrying a sealed data slate. No ship had been logged entering orbit. No clearance codes had been issued. The courier walked straight to the doctor. This facility is now under directive null silence, the courier said calmly. You will comply. The doctor stared. By whose authority? The highest authority remaining, the courier replied. The slate unlocked itself. The doctor read. All records of this birth were to be erased. Medical logs wiped. Visual feeds destroyed. Genetic samples incinerated. Any personnel present were to sign lifetime silence accords. Violations would not be punished. They would be removed. The nurse began to shake. It's just a baby. Yes, the courier said. That is the problem. The parents listened in confusion as officials explained that a clerical error had occurred. That their child's records would be delayed. That for safety reasons, they were to remain on world and limit communication for a short time. The mother looked down at her son, sleeping peacefully against her chest. Is he sick? No, the doctor said quickly. Too quickly. Perfect. In orbit, observation platforms unfolded from stealth. None carried weapons. None needed them. The council debated in silence. Dragons were not myths. They were not animals. They were not conquerors. They were balances. They appeared only when civilizations grew too cruel, too loud, too confident. They judged. They corrected. Then they vanished, leaving no bodies, no ruins, no victories. And now, one had marked a human child. Not a general. Not a ruler. Not a weapon. A baby. On Lathen 9, the child slept through it all. His breathing was slow and steady. His small hand curled around his mother's finger. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council agreed on something without argument. This must never be known. Because if the galaxy learned the truth, That dragons had chosen humanity before humanity even understood what it meant. Then silence would be the last thing anyone would have. The council chamber was sealed before the debate began. No banners. No observers. No recorded minutes. Only those old enough to remember were allowed inside. The chamber itself was built around absence. Smooth black walls absorbed light. No symbols marked power or rank. Those who sat there did not need reminders of authority. They carried it in memory, and in guilt. A projection hovered at the center. Not an image of the child. That was forbidden. Only data. Eye structure. Energy echoes. Probability curves that refused to settle. One of the oldest counselors finally spoke. His voice was thin, worn smooth by centuries. The markers are real. No one argued. Another counselor leaned forward, her species ancient and slow to show emotion. Dragons were never studied, she said. They were avoided. A younger member scoffed, unable to stop himself. With respect, that was fair. We are not helpless anymore. The room turned cold. An observer drone rotated toward him. You are mistaken, it said. We were helpless then. We are helpless now. We simply forgot. Silence returned. Dragons were not a species that could be catalogued. They had no known homeworld. No fossils. No genetic tree. Every attempt to engage them had ended the same way. The dragons appeared. The aggressors vanished. The records erased themselves. Entire empires collapsed without war. Fleets went dark without debris. Leaders were removed so completely that even memory bent around the loss. Dragons did not conquer. They corrected. One counselor tapped the air, pulling up forbidden history fragments. Every known dragon manifestation followed the same pattern. A civilization reached a tipping point. Excess cruelty. Excess control. Excess confidence. Another added, and every time, the dragons acted alone. A pause. Until now. The data stream shifted. A single probability spike glowed brighter than the rest. Humanity. The youngest counselor frowned. Humans are unstable. Short-lived. Emotional. Why would dragons choose them? No one answered immediately. Then the oldest voice in the chamber spoke again. Because humans endure. Several heads turned. They adapt faster than any recorded species, the elder continued. They bond easily. They suffer deeply. And when they decide something matters, they do not let go, even when it destroys them. The chamber darkened slightly as energy levels dipped. They are not balanced, the elder said. They are stubborn. A dangerous trait. Another counselor spoke, quieter now. But the child, it did nothing. No power output. No awareness. Exactly, said the observer drone. Dragons do not gift power. They assign responsibility. The word settled like weight. Responsibility. The council ran simulations. Thousands. Millions. Every outcome where the child was harmed ended the same way. Collapse. Not immediate destruction. Something worse. Trade lanes failing. Star systems isolating. Laws losing meaning. Trust dissolving. A slow unraveling that no fleet could stop. In every scenario where the child was publicly revealed, panic followed. Species demanding answers. Others demanding control. Some demanding the child's death. War followed soon after. Only one path showed stability. Silence. The humans must not know, one counselor said. Another hesitated. They will notice. Too many eyes are watching that world now. Then we watch quietly, came the reply. We protect the child without touching it. A third voice cut in. Or we remove it. The chamber reacted instantly. Energy fields flared. Several members stood. No, the elder said sharply. Removal is interference. Dragons mark, then observe. If we act directly, we invite judgment. A long pause. What about study? The younger counselor asked. Remote. Passive. The observer drone rotated again. Already attempted. The child disrupts long-range prediction models simply by existing. Even asleep. That unsettled many. A baby that bent probability by breathing. The council voted. Not on punishment. Not on control. On fear. Directive null silence was expanded. No further discussion in open chambers. No research grants. No quiet inquiries. The baby would live a human life. If dragons had chosen humanity, then the test was not the child. It was everyone else. On Lathen 9, the night cycle deepened. The mother rocked her son gently, humming an old Earth song she barely remembered learning. For a moment, the baby stirred. His eyes opened just a little. Bronze slits reflected the room, not as it was, but as it could become. Then he slept again. And across the galaxy, ancient systems adjusted their thresholds. Waiting. Humans noticed the silence before they noticed the fear. Ships passing near Lathen 9 began to drift off course, just slightly. Navigation systems corrected themselves without explanation. Data packets arrived late, then early, then duplicated. Nothing broke. Nothing failed hard enough to report. But humans were good at noticing patterns. A logistics analyst on Mars flagged it first. Trade numbers around one small colony world kept smoothing themselves out, as if chaos avoided the area on purpose. Piracy dropped to zero. Accidents stopped. Even minor disputes between crews resolved faster than usual. It looked like luck. Humans did not believe in luck. A quiet inquiry began. No announcements. No accusations. Just questions passed between people who trusted each other. Scientists, engineers, analysts. The kind of humans who did not shout when something felt wrong. One of them found a gap. A birth record on Lathen 9 existed, and did not exist. Time stamps pointed to a delivery. Medical resources were allocated. Staff schedules showed activity. But the child was missing. That alone was strange. Then the analyst noticed something worse. Every system that tried to reconstruct the record failed differently. Not with errors, but with polite corrections. As if the data itself preferred not to be seen. The analyst sent a message to an old friend. The friend sent it to someone older. Within weeks, a small group formed, unofficial and careful. They called themselves nothing. They did not hack council systems. That would be noticed. Instead, they studied history. Not the clean history taught in schools. The broken history. Civilizations that vanished without war. Fleets that never returned but left no wreckage. Laws that suddenly changed without explanation. Old council protocols that referenced regulatory events and then stopped. One word appeared again and again in erased margins and corrupted footnotes. Dragon. Humans had heard the word before. Always as myth. Always as metaphor. This time, they treated it as engineering. They mapped every known dragon-related disappearance and overlaid human expansion timelines. The overlap was small. Too small. Until recently. Something had shifted. A physicist noticed probability distortions clustering around one point in time. A sociologist noticed policy hesitation from the council that did not match previous behavior. A biologist noticed that long-range genetic scans near Lathen 9 returned noise instead of data. Not blockage. Refusal. The truth assembled itself slowly, like a machine built without instructions. Dragons were not monsters. They were not gods. They were limits. They appeared when civilizations crossed lines they refused to acknowledge. They did not punish anger. They corrected imbalance. And now, this was the part that made the humans sit very still. The dragons had not acted. They had chosen. Someone asked the question no one wanted to voice. Why us? The answer was not flattering. Humans were loud. Violent. Divided. Often cruel. But they were also strange. They protected weakness without reason. They bonded across difference. They remembered pain longer than comfort. And when they were given responsibility, even unwillingly, they took it personally. A historian said it quietly. We don't let go. That was the key. Dragons did not need warriors. They needed caretakers. The final piece came from Lathen 9 itself. A human doctor, older now, retired early without explanation, kept a private journal. It was never sent. Never shared. But humans had learned how to listen to silence. In the journal, one line was repeated, over and over, written years apart. He looked at me like I mattered. Not power. Not threat. Recognition. The group understood. The child was not a weapon. The child was a measure. A living reference point that dragons could use to observe how the galaxy treated humanity once humanity carried something precious without knowing it. If the galaxy protected the child, balance would hold. If the galaxy exploited it, correction would follow. The humans closed the files. They did not confront the council. They did not warn the galaxy. They did something far more human. They quietly adjusted. Trade routes near Lathen 9 became heavily civilian. Human presence increased, not militarily, but socially. Teachers. Medics. Families. Noise. Life. No one spoke of the child. But Earth changed its laws. No human child could be seized by off-world authority. No genetic sampling without consent. No council exceptions. The laws were framed as ethics. The council noticed. They said nothing. On Lathen 9, a small boy learned to walk. He fell. He laughed. He cried when his knee bled and stopped crying when his mother kissed it. Sometimes, when he slept, sensors far away drifted off scale. Sometimes, ancient systems adjusted values they had not touched in centuries. The boy did not know any of this. But somewhere beyond the edge of mapped space, something vast and patient watched the humans react. And waited to see if they would fail. Or finally grow into what had been trusted to them. The decision was made without ceremony. No speeches. No votes recorded. No objections allowed to linger. The council called it containment, not extraction. Words mattered to them. They believed careful language could soften consequences. They were wrong. The plan was simple. A small team. No uniforms. No weapons. No ships bearing council markings. Just quiet professionals trained to remove problems before problems announced themselves. The child was 4 years old. Old enough to speak in full sentences. Old enough to remember faces. Still young enough that the council convinced itself the damage would be minimal. He will be relocated, one counselor said. Raised safely. Studied gently. No one asked what gently meant. The insertion team entered Lathen 9 during local night. Not by hyperspace jump, but by drift, letting the planet's gravity pull them in like debris. No alarms sounded. No warnings triggered. That should have been their first sign. As they descended, long-range sensors began returning nonsense. Star maps lost precision. Timestamps desynced by fractions of seconds. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make prediction unreliable. The team leader frowned. We're getting noise. Ignore it, came the reply. Proceed. They landed outside the settlement, in a field where children played during the day. The grass bent beneath their boots. The air smelled of soil and warm metal. Normal. Too normal. They moved quietly toward the home. Lights were on inside. A human couple argued softly about nothing important. The sound was domestic. Safe. The child was asleep. The team breached without resistance. No alarms. No guards. No dramatic confrontation. Just a door sliding open and professionals stepping into a human living room. The boy lay curled beneath a blanket, clutching a stuffed animal with one arm thrown over its head. The team froze. Every monitor on their suits went dark at the same time. Not failed. Off. Above the planet, observation platforms lost telemetry. Then orientation. Then reference. Across the sector, navigation buoys blinked out one by one, like stars being gently pinched between fingers. The team leader swallowed. Command? No response. The child shifted. His eyes opened. Not wide. Not suddenly. Just enough. Bronze pupils focused, not on the intruders, but on the space between them. The air felt heavier. No heat. No pressure. Just weight. One operative fell to a knee, gasping, overwhelmed by a memory that wasn't his. Cities he had never seen. Species he had never learned. The feeling of being measured and found unfinished. Another dropped their equipment and backed away, whispering apologies in 3 languages. Nothing attacked them. Nothing needed to. Far beyond council space, ancient constructs stirred. Thresholds adjusted. Contingency paths that had never been used slid into place. The boy sat up. He looked confused. Mom? He said softly. The sound broke something. The weight vanished. Systems rebooted, partially. Enough for panic to spread. The team fled. Not in formation. Not cleanly. They left behind tools, data, dignity. In orbit, the council watched the failure cascade outward, touching systems they did not remember authorizing. No worlds burned. No fleets vanished. Something worse happened. Everyone understood. Trade agreements stalled without explanation. Allies hesitated. Minor species suddenly questioned ancient obligations. Long-standing assumptions stopped feeling solid. Authority thinned. The council issued a retreat order within minutes. All operations terminated. All assets withdrawn. Lathen 9 declared untouchable. The official reason given was environmental instability. No one believed it. On the planet, the boy's mother rushed into the room, breathless. What happened? The child rubbed his eyes. I had a bad dream, he he said. She held him close. You're safe. He nodded. And slept again. In the dark between stars, something vast observed the outcome and recorded a single result. Interference noted. Judgment deferred. The council survived the night. But they understood now. The dragons had not marked the child to protect him. They had marked him to see what would happen when power tried to take what it did not understand. And the test had only just begun. The galaxy did not change all at once. That was the lie the council told itself, that disasters were loud, that judgment arrived with fire and collapse. When nothing burned after Lathen 9, many believed they had escaped consequence. They had not. The changes were small. Subtle. Almost polite. Council sessions grew shorter. Not because agreements were reached, but because no one wanted to speak too strongly anymore. Words felt heavier than before. Declarations invited hesitation. Authority no longer felt absolute. Some councillors resigned quietly. Others withdrew to their home systems and stopped responding to summons. Entire committees were dissolved without replacement. No explanation was given. Across the galaxy, border disputes slowed. Not out of kindness, but uncertainty. Fleets held position longer than necessary. Admirals asked for second opinions. Generals slept poorly. Something was watching. On Lathen 9, life continued. The boy grew. He learned letters, then numbers. He asked endless questions and accepted simple answers. He scraped his elbows. He laughed too loudly. He hated vegetables and loved stories about heroes who protected others without being asked. His eyes were normal most of the time. Human. But sometimes, when the light hit just right, there was a hint of bronze beneath the brown. And people who saw it felt an urge they could not explain, to lower their voice, to choose their words carefully, to be better than they had planned to be. Humans did not announce anything. They did not claim destiny. They simply adjusted the world around the child the way they always had, by building systems that assumed protection mattered. Earth passed more laws. Quiet ones. No off-world custody without planetary consent. No secret councils operating over human populations. No exceptions written in small print. The council noticed. They said nothing. Trade routes shifted. Human convoys escorted refugee ships without fanfare. Medical aid arrived faster in unstable regions. Humans showed up where balance was breaking, not with fleets, but with presence. It was inconvenient. Species that once dismissed humanity began to hesitate before acting cruelly. Not because humans threatened them, but because something about harming the vulnerable now felt risky in a way that could not be calculated. Old myths resurfaced. Stories of dragons that did not burn worlds, but weighed them. Stories of judgment that came not from rage, but from patience running out. And always, somewhere in those stories, a new detail appeared. The dragons had trusted someone else. The boy stood on a hill one evening, watching the sun set. His mother sat nearby, tired but content. Why do people fight? He asked. She thought for a long time. Because they forget other people matter. He nodded, considering this very seriously. I won't forget, he said. Far away, ancient systems registered a shift. Not power. Not threat. Alignment. The council never tried again. They rewrote protocols. They limited their reach. They learned to ask instead of order, at least when humans were involved. Officially, nothing was ever confirmed. Unofficially, a rule spread through the galaxy, passed in whispers and half-jokes that no one laughed at. Never threaten human children. Never test human restraint. And never assume the dragons are gone. Because the truth, known only to a few and suspected by many, was far more unsettling than fire or war. The dragons had not returned. They had gone quiet. And they were watching how humans carried what they had been given. Not as rulers. Not as weapons. But as guardians of a balance that could no longer protect itself. The boy slept that night, dreaming of nothing important. And across the stars, history adjusted itself around him.